Hey there, history buffs! We've all heard of modern-day revenge stories that go viral, but today we're going back to the original viral sensations. The ones that literally reshaped kingdoms, armies, and empires. So sit tight because these stories might just blow your mind. Or at least make you rethink that passive-aggressive email you were about to send. Let's kick things off with a queen who didn't just take back her throne, she took over history. Cleopatra. You know her as Egypt's last pharaoh, famous for her beauty and love affairs with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. But Cleopatra wasn't just a charming politician, she was a master of survival. And that all started with one massive personal revenge plot against her little brother, Ptolemy III. Now, Cleopatra and her brother didn't have your typical sibling quarrel over who gets the bigger bedroom. No, this was life and death. After their father died, Cleopatra and Ptolemy co-ruled Egypt. But Ptolemy, who was only about 13 years old at the time, had advisors who didn't like Cleopatra's growing influence, so they basically kicked her out of power and exiled her. And Cleopatra? She was furious. Instead of sulking, Cleopatra pulled the ultimate power move. She smuggled herself back into Alexandria. Legend has it she wrapped herself in a carpet. Some say it was a sack, but we'll go with the carpet version because honestly, it's just cooler. Once inside the palace, she had herself delivered to none other than Julius Caesar, who was in town. She didn't just charm Caesar, she convinced him to help her get back on the throne. And with Caesar's army behind her, Cleopatra didn't just take back her kingdom. In the Battle of the Nile, Ptolemy's forces were crushed, and Cleopatra's brother, trying to escape by boat, mysteriously drowned. Yeah, drowned. Convenient, right? So Cleopatra wasn't just after power, she was after revenge, and she got it. She showed that when you mess with her, you better come prepared for a full-on Roman-backed smackdown. And by the way, she ruled Egypt for nearly 20 years after that. Queen goals. It wasn't just a sibling rivalry, it was a showdown that changed the course of history. Cleopatra's revenge wasn't just personal, it was political, and it secured her position as one of the most famous rulers of all time. Let's shift gears and talk about Genghis Khan, or as I like to call him, the king of long-term grudges. Before he became the fearsome ruler of the Mongol Empire, he was just a guy named Temujin, trying to survive in the harsh steppes of Mongolia. But his rise to power? It was fueled by revenge. As a young boy, Temujin's father was poisoned by a rival tribe, the Tatars, leaving him and his family destitute. Temujin was even betrayed by his allies, captured and enslaved. Most people would give up, but not Genghis. He escaped, slowly rebuilt his forces, and vowed to make the Tatars pay for what they did. Years later, when he had unified the Mongol tribes, Temujin, now Genghis Khan, got his revenge. He didn't just defeat the Tatars, he eradicated them. According to Mongol tradition, he ordered that every male taller than a cart axle be executed, and that's not even the full extent of his retribution. Genghis Khan wiped entire cities off the map to send a message. You mess with me, you mess with everything I will ever become. In other words, Genghis Khan didn't just settle scores. He wrote the rules on how to make your enemies disappear from the history books. But his story goes beyond personal vengeance. It's about a man who turned loss and betrayal into the foundation of one of the largest empires in history. Genghis Khan used revenge as a motivating force, not just to settle old debts, but to build something monumental. Now, if you thought Genghis Khan was ruthless, wait until you hear how the Vikings dealt with their enemies. Specifically, how they exacted revenge using something called the blood eagle. And yeah, it's exactly as horrifying as it sounds. According to the sagas, when a Viking chieftain was killed, his sons or heirs would sometimes perform the blood eagle on his enemy. This wasn't your typical Viking sword fight. It involved splitting the victim's ribs from the spine, pulling them outward to resemble wings, and then, wait for it, yanking out the lungs. Yeah, I know, this makes a bad breakup look a lot easier to handle, right? Historians debate whether this method was more myth than reality, but one thing's clear. Vikings believed revenge should be unforgettable, and in some cases, creatively brutal. And before you judge them too harshly, remember that back then, revenge wasn't just personal, It was how you maintained honor and status. For the Vikings, it wasn't enough to defeat your enemies. You had to make sure everyone remembered what happens when you cross a Viking family. So yeah, let's be glad revenge has evolved a bit since then, because I don't think any of us want to end up on the wrong side of a Viking disagreement. And speaking of unforgettable, let's not forget one of the most iconic revenge stories from ancient Rome, Julius Caesar's assassination and the massive payback that followed. Now, Caesar was the man in Rome, until he wasn't. His growing power made a lot of senators nervous, especially his close friend Brutus, who decided that Caesar had to go. Cue the infamous assassination, 23 stab wounds, and Caesar's dramatic last words, "Et tu, Brute." But what's fascinating isn't just Caesar's betrayal, it's what happened afterward. Caesar's adopted son, Octavian, swore to avenge his father's death. With the help of Mark Antony, he hunted down every last conspirator, including Brutus. They didn't just want revenge, they wanted Roman-style revenge, which meant eliminating anyone and everyone responsible. The final showdown came at the Battle of Philippi, where Brutus, realizing he was defeated, took his own life, and Octavian, he didn't stop there. He rose to become the first Roman Emperor Augustus, ensuring that the memory of Caesar's betrayal and his revenge would echo through the ages. So Caesar may have died, but his legacy and his revenge lived on in a big way. And thanks to that, Rome's republic fell, paving the way for the empire. When it comes to Roman revenge, it wasn't just personal, it was political, and it changed the course of history. Talk about playing the long game. Finally, let's talk about a queen who took revenge to epic proportions, Boudica, the warrior queen of the Iceni tribe in Britain. When the Romans came into her land and not only seized her property but also assaulted her daughters, Boudica didn't just get mad, she got even. Boudica united several tribes, raising an army that swept through Roman Britain like a tidal wave. She burned down Roman cities, including Colchester, St. Albans, and even London. Yep, London, leaving them in ruins. It was a revenge campaign like no other. Boudica wanted the Romans to pay for the humiliation and pain they caused her family, and she made sure they never forgot it. Though her rebellion was ultimately crushed, her story remains a symbol of resistance against oppression. Boudica's revenge wasn't just about reclaiming her honor, it was about fighting back against an empire that thought they could steamroll over her people. Spoiler alert, they couldn't. So what can we learn from these epic stories of revenge? Well, for starters, revenge isn't always just about getting even. In history, it's been about reclaiming power, avenging loved ones, and sometimes reshaping entire empires. Cleopatra's revenge put her back on the throne. Genghis Khan's vengeance laid the foundation for one of the largest empires in history. Boudica's fury inspired generations of resistance. At the end of the day, these stories remind us that revenge can have huge consequences, both personal and political. It's shaped dynasties, ended wars, and toppled empires. But hey, maybe stick to more peaceful resolutions in your everyday life, okay? Thanks for tuning in to Genius History. Make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below if there's another epic revenge story you want us to cover. Until next time, stay curious, stay brilliant, and remember, history is always watching.